Good evening, traveler. Settle in. Pull the blanket up to your chin. Let the day fade behind you. You're about to hear the first of 24 shadow tales, each one darker, deeper, and quieter than the last. This story isn't about heroes. It's about the forgotten hands behind closed doors, the ones who did what others wouldn't. Tonight begins your journey into the life of a medieval assassin, and why it truly, deeply sucked to be one. But before the darkness whispers your name, don't forget to subscribe if you enjoy stories that send chills through candlelight. And let me know in the comments, where are you listening from, and what time of night is it for you? I always wonder who's out there, curled in the dark, listening to shadows. Sure. The story begins now. You are given the mark. It begins with mud on your boots, blood on your sleeve, and hunger gnawing like a rat in your belly. You've slept in stables, in ruined chapels, under wagons, in graves that weren't quite empty. You've stolen food from beggars and coins from the dying. And still, you live. But tonight feels different. The inn reeks of stale ale, damp wood, and sweat ground deep into the bones of the place. The floor is sticky. The fire low and mean, coughing smoke rather than warmth. You sit in the darkest corner, hood pulled low, eyes scanning every hand near a knife and every throat near a secret. You're not from here. The locals can smell it. Their eyes linger on you a little too long. The barkeep didn't ask your name when he served your mug, just raised a brow and kept moving. You don't drink it. You need to stay sharp. Your contact is late. You've gone over the instructions again and again in your head. Sit alone. Don't speak. Wait. A black feather will be placed beside your cup. That's your man. You've never met him. No name. No second meeting. This is how the guild works, if this is even the guild. More likely it's someone testing you. Or using you. You don't care. If it means coin, if it means food, you'll kill whoever they ask. Your knife is dull. Your boots leak. Your stomach churns with a hollow ache that feels like punishment. You've counted the coins in your pouch 3 times. Still 2. Not enough to buy a bed, barely enough for bread. Then you see it. A feather. Black. Laid beside your mug. You don't look up, but you feel him sit. Hear the rustle of fine wool. Smell the faint hint of perfume, rosewater and ash. His voice is quiet, calm, and utterly cold. 1 mark. No witnesses. He sleeps in the steward's house, north of the gate. Do it before dawn. He places a pouch on the table. Doesn't wait for your response. Doesn't care. He's gone before you can blink. Inside the pouch, 5 silver coins. More than you've seen in months. Enough to disappear if you live. Enough to die for. And the name. Tomas of Elric. You sit there a long time, staring at that name. Letting it sink beneath your ribs. Tomas. Someone you've never met. Someone who's breathing right now. Dreaming. Trusting. And soon, he won't be. You leave when the inn grows quiet. When even the drunk with the loot has passed out against the wall. You walk past shuttered homes and empty troughs, through frost-kissed fields, the air sharp enough to cut. The night is deep. No dogs bark. No owls cry. Just the sound of your boots and the whisper of your breath. The steward's house is small. 1 chimney. 1 window. You crouch low, listening. Inside, only the soft rhythm of sleep. You press your ear to the door. No creak. No muttering. just warmth behind wood. You draw your blade. Your fingers tremble, not from fear, not exactly, but from the weight of what comes next. You've imagined it 100 times. You strike fast. Clean. No sound. A ghost. But your heart knows better. Your lungs tighten. Your blood thrums too loudly. You pour a drop of tallow onto the hinges. Wait. Count. Then slowly, you push the door open. Inside, it smells like wax and boiled oats. There, the shape under blankets. Breathing deep. Oblivious. You step forward. You don't think. Thinking would stop you. Kneel. Blade in hand. Closer now. Closer. He stirs. Eyes open. Too late. You pounce. One hand over his mouth. The other drives the knife deep. He thrashes. Your grip slips. The blade catches bone. Blood is hot and sudden. You press harder. Again. Again. Until he stops. Your breathing sounds like thunder in your ears. You sit beside him in the dark. Your hands are slick. His chest rises no more. Your stomach is no longer hungry, but something inside you feels emptier than before. You close his eyes. You weren't told to, but it feels necessary. You check the room. Take nothing. Leave nothing but silence and blood. Outside, the first threads of dawn stretch across the sky, pale and indifferent. You are no longer what you were. You are something else. Something colder. Something forgotten. You are an assassin. Your first kill goes wrong. The cold dawn slips in like a thief through the cracks of the steward's house. You stand outside, your breath fogging the chill morning air, your hands still sticky with the residue of your first kill. Tomas of Elric lies inside, eyes closed, lifeless. But you can't shake the weight pressing on your chest, heavier than the knife in your hand. You expected relief. Maybe even pride. But instead, there's only a hollow ache gnawing at your gut. You try to steady your breath, but the world tilts, every sound amplified, the creak of a wooden door, the caw of a distant crow. You swallow hard. What if someone saw? What if the wrong man walks in before you vanish? Your steps are hurried, careless even, as you slip away through frozen fields, the moon fading behind the jagged silhouettes of leafless trees. You haven't even made it a mile before the first mistake. A shout. A farmer's voice, sharp and urgent, tearing through the quiet morning. You spin around, eyes searching the shadows. No one. Just the empty path you came from. But the panic is real, flooding your veins like ice water. You clutch your cloak tighter, pushing forward faster. The town wakes slowly, unaware of the death just dealt under their very noses. But somewhere inside you, a little voice whispers that this won't be the last cry you hear, nor the last mistake you make. Later, back in the woods where you hide, the coins in your pouch jingle, but they feel cold, meaningless. Hunger twists sharper, pain sharper. You've never known a world where you had to kill to survive. Now, it feels like poison in your veins. You replay everything in your mind. The way Tomas' eyes open wide in shock. How his fingers clawed at your wrist, desperate, weak. How you almost faltered, almost failed. You aren't a killer. Not yet. You're just a frightened boy with a broken blade and a debt that never ends. And worse, there's a new danger. The mark you made is spreading. Whispers have already begun. Men in taverns look at you sideways. Guards ask questions you can't answer. You're a ghost, but ghosts sometimes leave shadows. Days pass, each one heavier than the last. You avoid the village, but the weight in your chest grows heavier still. The guild, or whatever shadowy force sent you, makes no sign. No comfort. No guidance. Just silence, as if you are already forgotten. You dream of Tomas. His face haunts you, not angry, not scared, but empty. Like a man who knew he was already lost. You're left with a brutal question. How much of yourself can you lose before there's nothing left? At night, you sharpen your knife by the fire, the sparks flying like tiny stars swallowed by darkness. You practice the motions over and over, silent steps, quick strikes, disappearing into shadows. But you know deep down, your first kill didn't go clean. It wasn't swift. And it wasn't quiet. And in the world of shadows, that can be a death sentence. Shadows grow longer, extended edition. The forest pressed in around you like a living thing, cold fingers threading through the tangled branches overhead. The moon hung low, a pale sickle slicing the night sky, casting faint shadows that danced like ghosts on the ground beneath your feet. Each step you took was muffled by a blanket of fallen leaves, but the crunch of brittle twigs echoed sharply in the silence, betraying your presence to the darkness. You wrapped your cloak tighter around your shoulders, but it did little to chase away the chill that settled in your bones. The silver coins in your pouch felt heavier than ever, not from their weight, but from the burden they represented. They were bought with blood, with fear, with the cold taste of death fresh on your tongue. Your first kill should have marked the beginning of a new life, a merciless, shadowed path you would walk alone and unafraid. Instead, it left you raw and trembling, haunted by the sharpness of Tomas' eyes as they opened wide in shock, the desperate clawing of his fingers as he fought to breathe, and the wet warmth of his blood soaking your hands. You swallowed hard, trying to steady your ragged breath. The night around you seemed too alive, too watchful. Every rustle of leaves sounded like a whisper, every snap of a branch a warning. You were not alone, you knew that much. Whispers in the village had already begun, and the scent of suspicion was a noose tightening around your neck. Your footsteps carried you deeper into the forest, away from the lights and warmth of civilization, into a realm where shadows stretched long and secrets rotted in the dark. The trees stood tall and silent like ancient sentinels, their twisted limbs scratching at the night sky as if trying to claw down the stars themselves. You reached a clearing where an old stone well sat half swallowed by moss and tangled ivy. Its mouth yawned wide like a hungry beast, swallowing moonlight and echoing silence back to the world. You paused, kneeling beside the cold stone, pressing your trembling fingers to the rough surface. You needed a moment, just a moment, to gather yourself. Your mind replayed every second of the kill, the way your hands had faltered, the wet shock of blood, the dull ache in your chest that no amount of cold air could quell. You wanted to forget it, to bury it deep beneath layers of silence and shadow, but the memories clawed at you relentlessly. Suddenly, a soft rustle shattered the quiet. You snapped your head toward the sound, dagger drawn and ready to strike. From the darkness stepped a figure, lithe, purposeful. A woman. Her eyes glimmered in the firelight, sharp and calculating, but there was something else there, too, a flicker of empathy, or perhaps pity. She wore dark leathers that hugged her like a second skin, and the hilt of a hidden dagger caught the moonlight at her waist. "You don't belong here," she said, voice low and smooth, yet carrying the weight of warning. You steadied your grip on your blade, ready to fight or flee, but curiosity tethered you in place. "Who are you?" you demanded, voice rough with exhaustion and fear. She stepped closer, eyes never leaving yours. Call me Mara. I've been where you are now, marked, hunted, and hunted in return. I know what it means to walk in the shadows for the guild. The word guild hit your ears like a curse. You had heard whispers in taverns, rumors of a shadowy network that commanded assassins and spies, men and women bound not by honor but by chains of fear and blood debt. She knelt down beside the well, her gaze distant, as if recalling dark memories. The guild doesn't care about you. They use you like a tool, a blade for their hands. And when you're broken or useless, they'll kill you without hesitation. You swallowed, the cold lump of dread rising in your throat. Why are you telling me this? Because, she said, her voice dropping to a whisper, there's more to this life than blind obedience. There are choices to be made, alliances to be forged. If you want to survive, you'll need to learn their ways, or you'll become another forgotten corpse. You wanted to ask more, to know how to fight back, to carve your own fate, but words stuck in your throat. You realized, with a sinking heart, that you were utterly alone in a world that did not forgive mistakes. Mara's gaze softened, just a fraction. I can teach you, but you have to want it. The firelight flickered, and for a moment the forest seemed less hostile, almost alive with possibility. You looked down at your hands, still stained, trembling. The road ahead was darker than you imagined, and the shadows were growing longer. You nodded. The pact was made. The lessons begin. The morning light filtered through the thick canopy, casting mottled shadows on the forest floor as Mara led you deeper into the trees. The silence between you was heavy, not the comfortable kind, but the tense quiet of two strangers bound by necessity and suspicion. You kept your eyes fixed on the path, but your mind raced. Questions tumbled over one another. Who exactly was Mara? How did she survive? Could you trust her? And most of all, what awaited you in the cold, ruthless world of the guild? After what felt like hours, you arrived at a hidden clearing encircled by tall oaks. A crude lean-to stood at its center, built from fallen branches and moss, almost invisible from the outside world. Mara stopped and looked at you, her eyes hardening. This will be your refuge for now, she said. No one else can find this place, and no one should. You nodded, swallowing your fear. It was far from the warmth of hearth and home, but better than the cold streets or the hunted woods. Mara crouched and pulled from her pack a worn leather-bound book, its pages yellowed and cracked. The guild teaches many things, she began. Not just how to kill, but how to survive, to deceive, and to disappear. If you want to live, you must learn to think like a shadow. She opened the book to a page filled with diagrams, silhouettes of knives, arrows, and strange symbols. First lesson: patience. Assassination is never about brute strength. It is about waiting, watching your target, understanding their habits, their fears, their weaknesses. A quick strike is only as good as the plan that comes before it. You listened, absorbing every word despite the ache in your muscles and the cold gnawing at your fingers. Mara's voice softened. The guild values precision. One mistake can mean death. But more than that, it values silence. You must never speak of your work. Never tell a soul. Trust is a luxury you cannot afford. You nodded again, feeling the weight of the unspoken laws pressing down on you. But there is more, Mara said, eyes narrowing. Politics run deep here. The guild is not just a collection of killers. It is a web of alliances, betrayals, and debts that stretch across kingdoms. You must learn who to trust, and who to kill before they kill you. Her words sent a chill down your spine. The forest seemed to close in tighter, the shadows lengthening. That night, Mara took you through the basics of stealth: how to move without sound, how to disappear into darkness, how to listen with all your senses. Your body ached with the effort, every muscle protesting the unfamiliar demands. But the hardest lesson came not from skill, but from Mara's stories. She told you of those who came before, men and women swallowed by the guild's hunger, broken by betrayal, discarded when their usefulness ended. Names you would never hear, faces you would never see, but lives that ended in blood and silence. You must harden your heart, she said, or it will be your undoing. You looked up at the stars, feeling smaller than ever, caught between fear and the desperate need to survive. The road ahead was long, dark, and riddled with dangers you could barely imagine. But one thing was certain. You were no longer just a frightened boy. You were becoming something else. Your first mission, Extended Edition. The night cloaked the world in darkness as you stood at the edge of the forest, the familiar trees now behind you, replaced by the looming shapes of the village's crooked rooftops. Mara had given you little, just a small leather pouch with a few coins, a sharp dagger honed to a cruel edge, and a crumpled scrap of parchment bearing a single name: Elric. Elric, a merchant with too many enemies and secrets that stretched further than you could guess. Your first mission. Not a lesson, not practice. This was real. Your hands trembled slightly, but you forced them steady. The weight of the pouch in your palm was heavier than lead. This was your payment, your lifeline, but also your chain. Mara's voice echoed in your mind. No mistakes. No mercy. You swallowed hard and stepped out from the forest's safety, slipping into the village like a ghost. The narrow streets lay quiet beneath a blanket of stars, flickering lanterns casting wavering pools of light against the mud-brick walls. The air smelled of wood smoke and damp earth, and the occasional bark of a dog shattered the silence. Your footsteps were light, measured. You moved with the grace of someone who had learned to disappear, blending into the shadows, every muscle taut with anticipation. Hours passed as you watched from the darkness. Elric was a large man, surrounded by guards and locked doors, but even he was not careful enough. You noticed the tension in his movements, the way his eyes darted nervously when he thought no one was watching. Patience, Mara had taught you. Watch and wait. You found yourself crouched behind a low stone wall, fingers numb from cold, eyes sharp and unblinking. Every minute felt like an eternity. Then, the moment. Elric stepped outside alone, clutching a small wooden chest. His breath came fast, shoulders hunched as if fearing unseen enemies. You followed silently, heart hammering in your chest, senses razor sharp. Your mind raced. One chance, one strike. You moved quickly, closing the distance, your dagger ready. The first touch was electric, a swift, silent strike to the throat. Elric's eyes went wide in shock, but before he could scream, your blade found its mark. The chest dropped to the ground, spilling coins into the dirt. For a heartbeat, the world held its breath. Then chaos. A shout erupted, sharp and angry. Footsteps pounded behind you, the sound of armor clinking and voices shouting orders. You ran, sprinting through the twisting alleys with the noise crashing after you like a storm. Your lungs burned. Your legs ached. Fear propelled you forward. You darted into a narrow passage, pressed yourself against the cold stone wall, and held your breath. The darkness swallowed you whole as the guards rushed past, their curses fading into the night. Minutes crawled by. Your heart pounded so loudly you feared it would give you away. Finally, silence. You slipped away into the woods, the weight of what you had done settling in your bones. Mara was waiting, a shadow among shadows, her eyes reflecting the firelight. "You survived," she said quietly, voice steady but unreadable. "That's all that matters." But inside you, a storm raged. The reality of taking a life, no, of ending a man's life in cold blood, sank deep into your soul. You realized then that the path you had chosen was darker, more dangerous than you ever imagined. This was no longer a lesson. This was survival. And every step forward would be a battle against the shadows inside and out. Into the web. The days that followed your first mission blurred into a relentless march of shadows and whispers. Mara led you back to the hidden clearing in the forest, but the sanctuary you had once found there now felt fragile, like a thin layer of ice over a dark abyss. You were no longer just a frightened boy thrust into a deadly role. You were becoming a thread in a vast, tangled web, where every move was watched, and every silence weighed heavy. Mara paced slowly as she spoke, her voice low and sharp, like a blade scraping stone. "The Guild is not just a group of killers," she said. "It is a network of power. Merchants, nobles, spies, all tangled together in a web of debts and favors. To survive, you need to understand this web, to know your place in it." You nodded, though your mind struggled to grasp the depth of what she meant. This was no simple band of murderers. This was a secret kingdom in itself, ruled by shadows. She produced a map, crudely drawn on parchment, marking various towns, roads, and secret meeting places. "Look here," she pointed. "This is where the Guild moves its goods and information. And here, the pockets of resistance, those who would see us crushed." Your gaze traced the lines, the dots, the hidden marks. Each symbol told a story of alliances and betrayals, of blood debts paid in silence. Mara's eyes glinted as she continued. "You must learn to walk this line. To make allies in the right places. To kill without hesitation when the time comes. And to never let your guard down." For the first time, she spoke of the Guild's inner politics, a brutal game where loyalty was currency, and betrayal was the sharpest knife. "The Council," she said, naming a shadowy body of elders who pulled strings behind the scenes, "decides who lives and who dies. But their decisions are not always just. Sometimes they sacrifice their own." The weight of this truth crushed you. You were a pawn, but also a target. Days turned into weeks. Mara taught you more than just how to kill. You learned to read faces, to see lies hidden behind smiles, to sense danger in a glance. You practiced moving like the wind, blending into crowds, slipping unseen through market squares and noble halls. One evening, Mara took you to a dimly lit tavern in a nearby village, a hub for the Guild's informants. The smell of smoke and spilled ale filled the air. Rough voices and laughter echoed as figures cloaked in shadow passed secrets in hushed tones. You felt eyes on you, testing, weighing. Mara introduced you to a man named Jorin, a wiry spy with a crooked smile and eyes that never stopped moving. "Watch and learn," Mara whispered. "Jorin knows how to survive in this game, but trust him only as far as you can throw him." Jorin grinned and raised a tankard to you. "Welcome to the real world, kid." That night, as you lay beneath the tattered canopy of your shelter, the magnitude of the world you'd entered settled in like a storm. You were no longer merely a killer in the shadows. You were a player in a dangerous game, where every alliance could be a trap, and every secret could be a death sentence. And the web was tightening. The first betrayal, Extended Expanded Edition. The forest around you was thick with silence, broken only by the distant call of a lone owl and the soft rustle of leaves stirred by a cold breeze. But inside, your world was tumbling into chaos. The dawn had barely touched the sky when Mara had summoned you, her face unreadable, lips pressed into a thin, grim line. The news she delivered was like a death sentence wrapped in shadows. There was a traitor in the guild. At first, you didn't believe it. The guild had been your refuge, your family in the darkness. But as the words settled cold and sharp like a blade, the truth cut deeper than any dagger ever could. Someone had betrayed you all. Your mind raced through every conversation, every fleeting glance, every shadow that had seemed too long in the corner of your eye. Who could it be? The thought was suffocating. Mara's voice was like iron. The leak has already cost lives. We don't know how much more damage it will cause. You swallowed hard. How do we find them? She looked at you with eyes that held both hope and warning. You're the one who's going to track them down. You've learned how to move unseen, how to listen, how to survive. Now you must use those skills to root out the poison in our midst. The hunt began. You slipped into the night like a shadow, stalking the underbelly of villages where whispered secrets traded hands like precious coins. The air was thick with suspicion. The faces of once familiar allies now seemed masked with deceit. Every tavern you entered held a new riddle, every street corner a new threat. You moved with careful precision, piecing together fragments of information, a hushed conversation here, a furtive glance there. You learned to read the lies woven between words, to sense the trembling hesitation that betrayed guilt. Jorin haunted your thoughts. His sly grin and shifting eyes had always unnerved you. Could the wiry spy be the traitor? You had no proof, only gut feelings gnawing at your resolve. One evening, the tavern was heavy with smoke and the sour smell of spilled ale. The flickering fire cast long shadows as patrons huddled in corners. You found Jorin seated alone, nursing a dark drink, his gaze sharp and calculating. You approached cautiously. We need to talk. His smile was tight, almost mocking. About what? You've been seen with men who don't belong here. Men who whisper of our secrets. Jorin leaned back, eyes narrowing. Careful, kid. Accusing the wrong person can get you killed. I'm not accusing, you said quietly. I'm searching for the truth. His laugh was bitter, hollow. Truth? There's no such thing here. Only survival. The tension between you crackled like a storm ready to break. Before words could turn to violence, Mara appeared, her presence commanding the room's attention. We end this now, she said, voice cold as steel. Confronted, Jorin's facade cracked. The truth spilled out, forced by desperation and fear. He had traded guild secrets for coin, believing it was the only way to survive a game he never truly understood. The execution was swift and silent. The shadows claimed him, as they would claim anyone who betrayed the fragile trust of the guild. But the damage was irrevocable. Rumors spread like wildfire. The guild's web of secrecy began to unravel, trust shattered into shards too sharp to gather. You felt the weight of it all settle heavy in your chest. Every step you took from that day forward was shadowed by doubt and fear. Allies became enemies overnight. The delicate balance of power shifted unpredictably, and you realized that the true enemy was not just outside, it was also within. At night, when the forest whispered lullabies of forgotten souls, you lay awake, haunted by the faces of those you once trusted. The line between friend and foe blurred into a dangerous gray. You were no longer just an assassin in training. You had become a player in a brutal, merciless game, one where the only certainty was betrayal. And the shadows were closing in. Crossroads of shadows. The bitter chill of early morning clung to your skin as you stepped quietly from the shadowed trees into the broken light of dawn. The forest, once your refuge and sanctuary, now felt like a cage closing in tighter with each passing day. Every rustle, every whisper of wind seemed to carry warnings, reminders that the world outside was no longer safe. The betrayal had shattered the fragile trust within the guild, and with it, your sense of certainty. The lines you once relied upon, friend and foe, right and wrong, blurred into shades of gray so dark they threatened to swallow you whole. Mara's voice echoed in your memory. In this world, loyalty is currency, and betrayal is the sharpest blade. Choose carefully whom you trust, for the shadows hide many faces. Now you found yourself at a crossroads. News had spread swiftly after Jorin's death. The council's grip tightened, suspicion clung like a second skin to every member of the guild. Rumors whispered of spies embedded deep within your ranks, men and women willing to sell secrets for coin or favor. Paranoia was as lethal as any dagger. Your own path was uncertain. Mara summoned you to a hidden chamber beneath the ruins of an ancient chapel, its crumbling stones concealing secrets older than memory. The air was thick with the scent of damp earth and extinguished candles, the silence broken only by the faint drip of water echoing through the cold halls. She waited for you there, eyes burning with fierce determination. "You've done well to survive this long," she said, her voice low and grave. "But now the real test begins." She unfurled a map, the parchment worn and folded from countless hands. Cities, villages, secret paths, and hidden safe houses were marked in ink that had faded to brown. Some places bore symbols only a few could decipher, markers of alliances, traps, and territories claimed by enemies. "The council is divided," Mara explained. "Some want to purge the guild of all outsiders, tighten control. Others seek to expand our influence, using any means necessary, even darker ones." Your gaze lingered on a small village marked with a red cross, a symbol you'd never seen before. Mara's finger rested there. "This is Black Hollow," she said. "A place where the council's enemies gather, plotting against us. But it's also a place of opportunity." She paused, eyes locking with yours. "We need someone who can walk into that fire and come out unscathed. Someone who can find the threads that connect our enemies and pull them apart." The weight of the task pressed down on you like a stone. You were still young, still learning. But the guild's survival now depended on you stepping into the very heart of darkness. "Why me?" you asked quietly. Mara's lips curled into a grim smile. "Because you've seen both sides. The innocence before the shadows and the brutal truth after. You understand the stakes better than most." Over the next days, you prepared with relentless focus. Mara taught you to read not just faces but intentions, to listen for the silence between words, to spot the tremble of a hidden fear. You practiced disguises, forged documents, and the art of slipping unnoticed into any place. The night before your departure, Mara gave you a small token, a carved wooden wolf, worn smooth by time. "For strength and cunning," she said. "Remember, the wolf survives by knowing when to run and when to fight." The journey to Black Hollow was long and treacherous. You traveled under the cover of darkness, navigating winding forest paths and forsaken roads. Each step felt heavier than the last, burdened by the knowledge that failure would mean not just your death, but the possible destruction of everything the guild had built. Black Hollow was unlike any place you had seen. It was a village swallowed by shadows, where trust was currency and suspicion the law. The streets were narrow and twisted, houses leaning as if burdened by secrets. The people's faces were wary, their eyes sharp and cold. You quickly learned that here, survival meant playing a dangerous game of masks and whispers. One evening, cloaked in a traveler's garb, you found yourself in a dimly lit tavern, the heart of Black Hollow's secret dealings. Smoke curled in the air, mingling with the scent of stale ale and fear. You spotted a man known as Carver, a ruthless informant who dealt in information and death. His reputation was fearsome, and his loyalty was for sale to the highest bidder. Sliding onto the bench beside him, you offered a guarded greeting. "I hear you know things." Carver's eyes gleamed with interest. "Depends on who's asking." You kept your voice low. "Someone who wants to keep the guild alive, and you out of trouble." For hours you navigated a web of half-truths and veiled threats, piecing together fragments of plans and betrayals. The deeper you delved, the more you realized that the enemies you faced were not just external forces but puppeteers pulling strings from the shadows within your own guild. When you returned tomorrow with your findings, the weight of your discovery pressed down on both of you. The Council's divisions were deeper than anyone had dared admit, and the threat to the guild was growing from inside as much as out. That night, as you lay beneath the stars, the wooden wolf warm in your palm, you understood something fundamental. This was not just a battle of blades and blood. It was a war of shadows and secrets. And you were right in the middle of it. The Web Titans. The days that followed your return from Black Hollow were heavy with tension. The guild, once a place of relative order amidst chaos, had become a labyrinth of suspicion and whispered threats. Every corner hid a potential enemy, every shadow concealed a secret. You could feel the eyes watching you, silent, calculating. Friends no longer greeted you warmly. Instead, their glances flicked away too quickly, their smiles too forced. The betrayal of Jorin had fractured the fragile trust, and now the guild was a house of mirrors reflecting endless doubts. Mara's warnings echoed constantly in your mind. Trust no one too easily. The Web Titans, and every step must be chosen with care. In the quiet moments, you wondered who among your closest allies might be the next to fall, or worse, to turn against you. The Council's factions grew bolder. Some called for harsh purges to root out the traitors. Others, hungrier for power, used the chaos to manipulate and deceive. The delicate balance Mara spoke of was crumbling. One evening, as twilight deepened and the guild's halls filled with murmurs, you were summoned once again. This time, it was not Mara who awaited you, but Silas, an elder assassin known for his ruthless efficiency and icy demeanor. Sit, he commanded, voice like gravel. You obeyed, heart pounding. Silas's eyes pierced you. The Council is fracturing faster than we feared. We need someone who can move between the factions, gather intelligence, and keep the guild from tearing itself apart. He slid a sealed parchment across the table. Inside is a list of names, suspected sympathizers, potential enemies, and uncertain allies. Your task is to find the truth behind these names. Bring me proof. The weight of the task settled heavily on your shoulders. Each name on that list represented a life, a possible friend or foe. One wrong move could ignite a bloodbath. You nodded, understanding the gravity. I won't fail. Silas's cold smile was the only reply. Your investigations led you deeper into the dark heart of the guild's politics. Secret meetings in underground chambers, coded messages slipped in shadowed alleyways, and alliances forged and broken under the watchful eyes of spies. You learned that survival was no longer about the sword alone, but about outthinking enemies who wore the faces of friends. One night, under the cover of rain, you met with Leora, a mysterious informant whose loyalty was as shifting as the tides. She handed you a message, its meaning hidden behind layers of riddles and symbolism. "This will lead you to the next thread," she whispered. "But beware, the closer you get, the more dangerous the game becomes." Deciphering the clues, you discovered a conspiracy reaching higher than you imagined, a plan within the council to seize control of the entire guild, sacrificing anyone who stood in the way. Fear and determination warred inside you. The stakes were no longer just your life, but the future of everyone you had sworn to protect. As you prepared to confront this new threat, a whisper reached your ears, a warning from an unexpected source. "Not all shadows come from the night," the voice said. "Some crawl from within." The web was tightening, and you stood at its center, caught between loyalty and survival, trust and betrayal. Every choice could mean life or death. Shadows in the council. The heavy stone walls of the guild's hidden chamber loomed above you as you descended into the depths beneath the city. Here, where secrets were currency and silence was a weapon, the air was thick with tension. Flickering torchlight cast long, restless shadows that danced across the ancient carvings, silent witnesses to centuries of whispered plots and broken vows. The council awaited. You could feel their eyes upon you before you even entered the room, cold, calculating, and filled with suspicion. These were the leaders of the guild, the architects of its power, and now, the center of its turmoil. Mara stood to one side, her expression unreadable but her presence a steadying force amidst the swirling storm. Silas stepped forward, his voice grave. "The time has come to address the fractures within our ranks. We must root out the traitors before they destroy us from within." The room was filled with murmurs, some anxious, others defiant. Alliances formed and shifted with each glance, each whispered word. You were called upon to speak, to present the evidence you had gathered. As you laid out the names and the proof, the atmosphere thickened with tension. Faces you once trusted hardened, eyes darted nervously, and a low murmur of disbelief spread. Then came the accusations, veiled threats, sharp words, and denials that rang hollow. "You accuse me?" snapped a figure cloaked in dark robes, Lord Varen, a powerful and feared member of the council. "You would see the guild torn apart on the word of a youth?" Mara's eyes flicked to you, a silent command to stand firm. You met Lord Varen's gaze. "The evidence is clear. We cannot afford to ignore the danger." The debate escalated, voices rising like a tempest in the confined space. Some demanded swift justice, others urged caution, fearing civil war within the guild. In the midst of the chaos, you felt a hand lightly brush your shoulder. Turning, you saw Leora, her eyes sharp and filled with unspoken warning. "Watch your back," she whispered. "Not everyone here wants the guild to survive." Her words chilled you. As the council meeting adjourned without resolution, you understood that the true battle was just beginning. The council's fractures were deeper than you imagined. And the enemy was not just a traitor but the very structure meant to protect you. In the days that followed, you navigated a treacherous path, gathering allies, uncovering plots, and evading assassination attempts that came too close for comfort. Each encounter tested your resolve and your skills. The line between friend and foe blurred, and every decision weighed heavily on your conscience. One night, as you trained beneath the pale moonlight, Mara approached, her face etched with worry. The council is divided, and the guild's future hangs by a thread, she said quietly. We need unity, or we will fall. You nodded, feeling the crushing weight of responsibility. In the shadows, plans were made, alliances forged and broken, and the dance of power continued, deadly and unyielding. You were no longer just a shadow in the night. You were becoming the storm itself. The gathering storm expanded. The guild was no longer a hidden refuge, but a powder keg, its very foundations cracking beneath the weight of betrayal, greed, and ambition. The once silent halls now buzzed with whispered rumors and sharp glances that cut deeper than any dagger. Trust had become the rarest currency, more valuable than gold and more fragile than glass. In the pale, gray light of dawn, you stood silently by the window of Mara's chamber, gazing down at the city slowly awakening below. The morning fog clung to the crooked rooftops like a shroud, concealing the turmoil that festered beneath the surface. The streets seemed peaceful, but you knew better. The fragile peace was nothing but a thin veil stretched over a brewing storm. Mara entered without a sound, her presence like a steady anchor amidst the chaos. Her eyes were dark pools of determination and exhaustion, but her voice was steady. We cannot wait any longer, she said, closing the door behind her. The council is fracturing faster than we anticipated. Factions have hardened their stances. Some push for total dominance, others seek survival through alliances, no matter how tenuous. If we do not act now, the guild will implode, and with it, everything we fought for. You turned, meeting her gaze. What must I do? She laid out a worn, creased map across the table, marking it with swift strokes of charcoal. We must gather those still loyal to the guild's original code, the true assassins, not opportunists. They hide in the shadows, wary and scattered. We need their strength, their loyalty. But most importantly, we must unite the factions before the council's divisions turn into civil war. The weight of the task pressed on you, heavy and unyielding. And what if they refuse? What if the fractures run too deep? Mara's eyes flickered with a spark of steel. Then we fight alone, and we become what we despise. The next weeks were a blur of shadowed meetings, coded messages, and dangerous travels. You navigated the city's dark arteries, forgotten tunnels, narrow alleyways slick with rain, and hidden courtyards where secrets passed like silent ghosts. Each meeting was a delicate dance. You approached leaders of the various factions with cautious respect, aware that one wrong word could turn an ally into an enemy. Some greeted you with cold suspicion, eyes narrowed like hunting beasts. Others were more open, their faces etched with worry and the scars of past betrayals. One such ally was Ilara, a fierce warrior known throughout the guild for her unyielding loyalty and tactical genius. She bore the marks of countless battles, both physical and political. Her eyes, sharp and piercing, held a simmering anger at the fractures that had torn their world apart. In a quiet, dimly lit tavern filled with smoke and murmurs, you met her. The air was thick with the scent of spilled ale and desperation. We're all trying to survive, Ilara said, voice low but fierce. But survival means nothing if we lose who we are. Together, you forged a tentative alliance, binding your fates to a fragile hope of unity. Yet not all were ready to follow your lead. In a shadowed corner of another tavern, a man named Varric approached. His reputation as a ruthless and skilled assassin preceded him. His cold, calculating eyes held no warmth. This path leads only to blood and ruin, he warned, his voice a harsh whisper cutting through the haze. Some wounds cannot be healed. His words echoed in your mind as you pressed onward. Back in the guild's chambers, preparations for a grand council meeting began, a gathering meant to unite the factions under a single banner before the fractures turned deadly. But threats escalated. The first was subtle, a poisoned meal left on your doorstep. You tasted the bitterness just in time, spitting out the venom before it could claim you. Then came the shadows, figures lunging at you from dark corners, blades aimed with deadly precision. Every day was a test of your instincts and skill. Friends were no longer friends. Enemies wore familiar faces. One storm-lashed night, you found yourself cornered in a narrow alley. The rain hammered down, soaking you to the bone. From the shadows emerged an assassin cloaked in black, their blade gleaming in the flickering torchlight. The fight was swift, brutal, a deadly dance of steel and shadow. You parried and dodged, muscles burning with effort and adrenaline. Every strike was a gamble, every breath a whispered prayer. You barely escaped with your life, the assassin vanishing into the night as quickly as they appeared. The storm outside mirrored the tempest raging within the guild's walls. Finally, the day of the council meeting arrived. The chamber was packed with representatives, some eager, others hostile, all aware that this could be the guild's last chance at survival. Voices rose in fierce debate. Old grudges resurfaced like poisoned arrows. Accusations flew with venomous precision. The air was thick with tension, each word a potential spark in the powder keg. Mara's voice cut through the chaos, firm and commanding. "We stand at the edge of ruin. We can tear ourselves apart, or we can unite and fight for what we are." Slowly, grudgingly, agreements were forged. The factions pledged a fragile alliance, a shaky truce born not of trust but of necessity. Yet, as you left the chamber, you knew this peace was temporary, a brief lull before the storm intensified. The web of shadows tightened around the guild, and you stood at its very center, burdened by the weight of choices that would decide the fate of all. The first strike expanded. The fragile peace that barely held the guild together was about to be ripped apart, shattered by a sudden and violent storm. The tension that had been simmering beneath the surface exploded into chaos, and you felt it like a crack splitting through your bones. You had barely closed your eyes that night, exhaustion pressing heavily after the council's tense deliberations, when a sharp, urgent noise jerked you awake, a clang of metal against metal, a distant shout that echoed through the stone corridors, and the unmistakable crackle of fire. Your heart slammed against your ribs as you sprang to your feet, grabbing your weapons without thought. The guild was under attack. Darkness outside was pierced by flickering flames licking at the edges of windows and doors. Smoke rolled in thick, choking waves, turning familiar halls into nightmarish tunnels of shadow and fire. The scent of burning wood and fear filled the air. You raced through the corridors, passing fellow assassins who scrambled to arm themselves, faces pale but eyes alight with the same fierce determination you felt. The quiet, disciplined world of shadows had been torn apart, replaced by chaos and panic. From the smoke emerged masked figures, swift, ruthless, and deadly. They moved like phantoms, striking with precision and vanishing before you could fully react. The clash of steel rang out like thunder, the air thick with shouts and cries. Ahead, Elara fought like a whirlwind of fury, her sword flashing as she cut down attacker after attacker. Her eyes met yours, blazing with defiance. Without a word, she signaled, "Hold the line." You took your place beside her, the two of you becoming a barrier of steel and resolve. The battle swirled around you, every moment a fight for survival. Your muscles screamed as you parried a vicious strike, then lunged to defend a comrade pinned against the wall. You could hear Mara's voice rising above the chaos, sharp and commanding. Hold your ground. The guild will not fall tonight. Time blurred. There was no room for fear or hesitation. Every breath was ragged, every movement fueled by adrenaline and instinct. Flames cracked and roared as the fire spread, threatening to consume everything. You dashed through the smoke-filled halls to a barricade under siege. Several of your comrades were trapped, their backs against crumbling stone. Together, you fought back the attackers, a desperate push that sent them retreating into the night. But the cost was terrible. The guild's defenses lay broken in places. The attackers had vanished as mysteriously as they had come, leaving behind ruin, blood, and unanswered questions. Who had ordered this assault? Was it the work of a rival faction? Or a deeper betrayal from within? Dawn found you standing amid the wreckage, ash and soot coating your skin, lungs burning with smoke. The weight of loss settled heavily on your chest. Mara approached, her face grim but resolute. This was only the beginning. They shown their hand. You nodded, the fire of resolve reigniting inside. We will rebuild. We will hunt them down. The first strike had ignited a war that would tear through the guild and beyond. And you were standing at its bloody center. Aftermath and shadows. The dawn broke with a cold light that did little to warm the heavy chill settling over the guild's ruins. The acrid stench of smoke clung to the air, mixing with the metallic tang of blood spilled on cold stone floors. You moved through the shattered halls, every step echoing the weight of loss and the fragile hope that still flickered within. The first strike had torn more than timber and stone. It had ripped open old wounds and buried secrets. The silence between the survivors was thick, punctuated only by whispered conversations and the occasional crackling of dying fires. Mara gathered the remaining leaders in the great hall, their faces grim but their eyes burning with determination. The council table was scarred, bearing marks from the night's chaos, but the meeting pressed on. We have been shown our enemy's strength, Mara began, her voice steady but edged with urgency. They strike to weaken us, to break our will. But we are not broken. You watched as the room shifted. Some nodded in fierce agreement. Others remained guarded, their loyalties questioned in every glance. We must root out the traitors among us, Mara continued. The attack was too precise, too informed. There is a leak, a poison within our ranks. Your thoughts raced. You knew the bitter truth. Betrayal was the deadliest enemy. Outside, scouts reported sightings of enemy patrols probing the city's outskirts. The fragile alliances you had fought to build now faced a test by fire, both figuratively and literally. You volunteered to lead a reconnaissance mission, knowing that uncovering the attackers' plans was vital. As you prepared, Alara joined you, her expression grim but resolute. We move at dusk, she said. The shadows will be our cover. The night air was cool against your skin as you slipped through the city's secret passages, the familiar weight of your weapons a steady comfort. Every shadow seemed alive, every whisper a potential threat. You discovered signs of a larger force gathering beyond the city walls. Mercenaries, rival factions, and unknown agents preparing for a full-scale assault. Returning to the guild, you brought the grim news. Plans for defense and counterattack quickly took shape. The council debated fiercely, old rivalries flaring even as the common threat grew. Amid the tension, you found moments to reflect on the cost, the friends lost, the innocents shattered, and the path ahead paved with danger. Yet beneath it all burned a fierce resolve. You were no longer just an assassin hiding in the shadows. You were a warrior fighting for the very soul of the guild. And the coming storm would test everything you were. The web tightens. The guild was no longer a simple network of assassins. It had become a battleground for power, trust, and survival. The walls you once considered sanctuary now echoed with suspicion, secrets, and the cold calculus of political maneuvering. Days after the first strike, the air was thick with unease. The wounds from the attack were still fresh, splintered wood, blood-stained stones, and the hollow absence of those who would never return. Yet even as the guild rebuilt its shattered defenses, an invisible web began to tighten around you all, a web spun from betrayal and ambition. Mara convened the council once more in the dim light of the great hall, shadows dancing against the stone walls. Her voice was firm, commanding attention. We are no longer dealing with simple rivals. Our enemies have allies within and without. It is a war fought not just with blades, but with lies and manipulation. The room was silent, save for the faint crackle of the fire. Eyes darted nervously, each person weighing their words carefully. You could feel the tension like a living thing, coiling tighter with every breath. You stepped forward, the weight of responsibility heavy on your shoulders. We need intelligence, clear, actionable knowledge. I propose a covert operation to infiltrate their ranks, to learn who leads this assault and what their ultimate goal is. Elara nodded sharply, her gaze piercing. And to strike back before they can regroup. If we wait, we will be crushed. Plans took shape quickly. You and Elara would lead a small, trusted team deep into enemy territory. A mission fraught with peril but necessary to turn the tide. The preparation was meticulous. Every detail mattered, from forged documents to silent weapons, from coded signals to escape routes traced and memorized. As dusk fell, the city outside softened into muted shadows, and you slipped into the night like a ghost. The streets were quieter than usual, the weight of recent events heavy in the air. The journey beyond the guild's walls was tense and slow. Every shadow seemed alive with threat, every sound, a possible alarm. Your team moved silently through dense woods and abandoned villages, guided only by faint whispers of intelligence. At night, you huddled around small fires, sharing stories and strategies in hushed tones. Trust was both a weapon and a shield, fragile but vital. Along the way, you encountered signs of your enemy's growing strength, fortified camps, armed patrols, and cryptic symbols marking territories claimed. One evening, as moonlight filtered through bare branches, you found a hidden outpost guarded by hardened mercenaries. Observing from the shadows, you caught fragments of conversation, plans for a massive strike aimed directly at the guild's heart. The revelation hit like a cold blade. Time was running out. Returning to the guild with this vital intelligence, you were met with a storm of urgency and debate. The council grappled with the implications. Some argued for immediate preemptive attack, others urged caution to avoid a trap. Mara's voice cut through the chaos once more. We stand at a crossroads. Our survival depends on unity and swift action. Hesitation will be our undoing. In the days that followed, the guild prepared for war, sharpening blades, gathering allies, and weaving alliances with neighboring factions who shared a common enemy. Through it all, you wrestled with your own fears and doubts. The shadows had grown darker, and the line between friend and foe blurred until indistinguishable. But with each passing day, your resolve hardened. You would fight not just for survival, but for vengeance, honor, and the future of the guild. The gathering storm. The days that followed felt like the calm before a tempest, but beneath the quiet, a storm was raging, one that threatened to consume everything you had fought for. The guild's walls were reforged, the scars of battle hidden beneath new stone and sweat, but the tension pulsed in every whispered conversation and shadowed glance. You could feel it in your bones, the looming threat of war, the steady tightening of the noose around your people. Every decision, every step forward was weighed against the cost of failure. In the dim light of early morning, you stood in the training yard, watching the assassins hone their skills. Their movements were sharper now, driven by purpose, sharpened by loss. The air smelled of sweat, steel, and resolve. Elara approached, her eyes dark with worry but fierce with determination. "We can't afford mistakes. Every strike we plan now must be flawless." You nodded, feeling the same fire burning in your chest. "We strike first. Hit their leaders before they hit us." The council gathered in secret, maps and plans spread across a heavy wooden table. Mara's voice was steady but urgent as she outlined the strategy. "We will divide our forces, some to defend the guild and key allies, others to launch targeted attacks. Our goal is to dismantle their command structure and cripple their ability to wage war." You volunteered to lead the offensive strike team, an elite group trained for precision and stealth. The weight of command settled on your shoulders, a heavy mantle you bore with grim resolve. Preparation took days. Weapons were sharpened, routes memorized, disguises perfected. You forged alliances with unexpected factions, each meeting shadowed with suspicion and the risk of betrayal. At night, you walked the city's rooftops, tracing the familiar paths you had once traveled as a silent killer. Now, the stakes were higher than ever. Failure meant not just death, but the destruction of everything you held dear. As the night of the strike approached, the air grew thick with anticipation. Your team assembled in the dark, faces set and silent, hearts pounding beneath leather and steel. You whispered final instructions, your voice low but firm. "Remember your training. Stay silent, move fast. Our lives depend on it." Slipping into the shadows, you led your group through twisting alleys and hidden passages, every sense alert. The city was alive with danger. Every step could mean discovery. Every breath could invite death. You reached the enemy's encampment, a sprawling network of tents and guards, lit by flickering torches and guarded by watchful eyes. The moment arrived. You signaled the attack, and chaos erupted. Steel flashed in the dark, muffled screams pierced the night, and the clash of combat echoed like thunder. Your team moved like shadows, silent, deadly, efficient. You struck at the heart of the enemy's command, cutting down leaders with ruthless precision. Each life taken was a step closer to turning the tide. But the enemy was fierce, their desperation fueling their fury. You fought with everything you had, blade, wit, and will. When dawn broke, you and the surviving members of your team slipped away into the fading darkness. The enemy camp lay in ruins, their command shattered, but the cost was steep. The guild had won a critical battle, but the war was far from over. As you returned to the guild, exhaustion weighed heavy, but so did a new fire, hope. You knew the storm was gathering, but you also knew that you would face it head-on. For the guild. For vengeance. For survival. Shadows within. The fires of battle had barely died when a colder, more insidious threat began to creep through the guild's veins. The first strike had revealed more than an external enemy. It had exposed cracks in loyalty and trust, fractures hidden beneath years of silence. You felt it as soon as you returned to the guild's inner sanctum, eyes that lingered too long, whispers swallowed in sudden silence, and the unmistakable weight of suspicion hanging heavy in the air. Mara called an emergency meeting, her face set with grim determination. "We have a traitor among us," she announced. "One who feeds our enemies with secrets, who turns our strength to dust." The room tensed, breaths caught in throats. No one spoke, but the accusations burned hotter than any sword. You stepped forward, voice steady but firm. "We must root them out before they destroy us from within." The search began, subtle, silent, and deadly. Every word was weighed, every ally watched. Trust became a weapon as sharp as any blade. Days stretched into nights filled with tension. You sifted through coded messages, intercepted secret meetings, and shadowed suspicious figures. Each clue brought you closer to a bitter truth. Betrayal was deeper than anyone dared admit. Elara stood by your side, her eyes reflecting the same grim resolve. "They think they can break us with whispers and lies. We will prove them wrong." In the quiet moments you wrestled with doubt. Could you trust even yourself? The shadows seemed to mock your every step, hiding enemies in the most unlikely places. Then, a breakthrough, a cryptic note, a hidden passage, a familiar face caught in a lie. The traitor was revealed, not a stranger but one of your closest confidants, someone you had once called friend. Confrontation was inevitable. The accused denied at first, then broke under the weight of proof and guilt. Their motives were tangled: fear, ambition, revenge, a toxic mix that threatened to poison the guild's soul. Mara's judgment was swift but measured. "Betrayal is a blade that cuts deep, but the guild must survive." The traitor was cast out, but the wound remained, a painful reminder of vulnerability and the cost of war. Yet, in the midst of darkness, bonds were reforged. The guild emerged hardened, more united but wary. You and Elara stood together, watching as the sun rose over the battered stronghold. The battle held of danger, ambition, and a hint of decay. Mara summoned the council again. Her eyes, fierce and unwavering, scanned the room as she spoke. "We have endured betrayal from within and assault from without. Now we must forge alliances. But tread carefully. Those who offer friendship often carry daggers hidden beneath their cloaks." You stepped forward, heart pounding, voice steady with the weight of responsibility. "I will serve as envoy. I will seek out those willing to stand with us, to strengthen our hand. But I will not be blind to the poison that lurks in every bargain." Your first meeting was with Lord Roderick, a man whose reputation was as sharp as the finely tailored blade that hung at his side. His manor rose grand and ominous on the city's edge, guarded by armored men whose eyes missed nothing. The scent of rich wine and burning candles filled the opulent hall where he received you. "An assassin as diplomat," he said with a sardonic smile, eyes glinting with amusement and calculation. "You've learned well, I see." Negotiation here was a dance of masks and veiled threats. Roderick spoke in riddles, his words laced with promises and cautions. "Alliances," he said smoothly, "are like webs spun by spiders. They catch the flies, but sometimes the spider is trapped in its own web." You listened carefully, probing for truth behind the charm. You had to convince him that the guild's survival was also his interest, without appearing desperate, without revealing your own vulnerabilities. Back in the guild, rumors spread like wildfire. Rival factions moved like shadows, forging their own pacts, readying for the inevitable clash. The city teetered on a knife's edge, and every step you took risked plunging it into chaos. Days blurred into nights filled with tense diplomacy, and your nights were spent pacing the guild's rooftop, watching the city's flickering lights like distant stars. You thought of those lost in battle, those betrayed in silence, and those who still stood beside you. Elara, ever vigilant, was your anchor. One evening, as a cold wind swept through the stone corridors, she pulled you aside. "We walk a razor's edge," she said quietly. "One misstep, one misplaced word, and everything crumbles." The weight of command pressed on your shoulders, a mantle heavy with the hopes and fears of many. In the midst of fragile alliances, you uncovered whispers, dark rumors of a conspiracy that stretched far beyond the city walls. Letters intercepted, secret meetings glimpsed, a shadowy cabal pulling strings to ignite a war that could consume entire kingdoms. The enemies you faced were no longer merely rival factions or traitorous insiders. They were pawns of a greater, more insidious force. Your role expanded from assassin to diplomat, spy, and strategist. Every meeting was a gamble, every alliance a potential trap. And yet, through it all, your resolve hardened. The guild's survival was your burden and your destiny. As the days passed, you found yourself caught in a web of politics more tangled than any you had known. Lords jockeyed for power, merchants schemed for profit, and mercenaries sold their blades to the highest bidder. You negotiated, deceived, and fought, not always with sword, but with words sharper than any dagger. Sometimes, the greatest battles were won before a single arrow was loosed. The storm was gathering, dark, fierce, and unstoppable. But you were ready. For in the shadows, alliances were forged, and enemies were made. The web tightens. The city's streets no longer felt like familiar paths, but a labyrinth of shifting shadows and whispered dangers. Each step you took was measured, each glance over your shoulder a reminder that the enemies you made yesterday could be waiting in the dark today. The alliances forged were fragile threads, woven into a web that grew ever tighter and more perilous. Back inside the guild, tension simmered beneath the surface like a slow-burning fire. The wounds of betrayal still throbbed, and trust was a currency more valuable than gold, yet rarer than the finest steel. Mara's gaze was harder now, her decisions steely and precise, but even she could not quell the growing unease. You found yourself caught in a storm of deception and half-truths. Reports arrived daily, spies uncovered, messages intercepted, plans foiled, yet the enemy's reach seemed limitless. Your every victory was met with a counterstrike, and every step forward felt like walking on a razor's edge. The shadows of the past crept into your mind, memories of battles fought in silence, the faces of those lost, the cold steel of your blade flashing in the night. But now, the battlefield had expanded, no longer confined to the streets and rooftops but tangled in courts and backrooms where words could kill as surely as any dagger. You sat with Elara in the quiet of the guild's war room, maps and coded letters spread before you. Her fingers traced routes and names, eyes sharp and calculating. "They're tightening their grip," she said quietly. "We're not just fighting enemies in the field, we're fighting for every breath the guild takes." You nodded, feeling the weight of her words settle deep in your bones. "We need to strike before they close the net completely." In the days that followed, you led covert missions into enemy territory, slipping through shadows and scaling walls with the grace of a ghost. Each operation was a high-stakes gamble, extraction of key informants, sabotage of supply lines, interception of deadly messages. One night, as the moon hung low and silver over the city, you infiltrated a heavily guarded estate rumored to house a trader's rendezvous. The air was thick with danger, every breath shallow as you moved unseen through halls lined with ornate tapestries and guarded by men whose loyalty was as uncertain as the flickering torchlight. You found the room where secrets were traded like currency, figures cloaked in darkness, voices low but urgent. You recorded every word, every name, piecing together a map of betrayal that spread far beyond what anyone had imagined. But danger was never far behind. On your way out, a trap was sprung. Blades flashed in the dark, and you fought with a desperation born of survival. The clash was fierce and brutal, your blade singing its deadly song as you carved a path through your foes. Wounded but alive, you escaped into the night, your heart pounding with the knowledge that the war had escalated, and the enemy was closer than ever. Back at the guild, your findings sparked swift action. Mara rallied the council, plans were revised, defenses strengthened. Allies were summoned, and new strategies forged. Yet the cost weighed heavy. Every victory demanded a price in blood and trust. Every step forward was shadowed by the threat of betrayal. As dawn broke over the city, you stood once more on the guild's rooftop, watching the sun chase away the night's shadows. The web was tightening, but so was your resolve. For in this game of shadows and steel, survival meant embracing the darkness and becoming its master. Echoes of deception. The city never truly slept. Its breath was a steady murmur of secrets and lies, of whispered plots behind closed doors and fleeting shadows cast by flickering lanterns. As the sun dipped below the horizon, the streets became a stage for unseen puppeteers whose strings tugged at the fate of many, among them you. Days after your narrow escape, the weight of your discoveries pressed upon your mind like a relentless tide. The enemy was not a single force, but a network, a spider's web of conspirators stretching deep into the city's veins. Every alliance you had forged now seemed fraught with uncertainty, every friendly face potentially hiding a dagger. Mara's counsel was steady, but even her unwavering resolve could not mask the growing tension. "Trust is a luxury we cannot afford," she said grimly. "Yet we must act as though we have it, if only to survive." You agreed, but the knowledge gnawed at your spirit. How many within the guild were already tainted? How many would fall before the truth emerged? In the shadows of a ruined chapel, you met with a contact who brought news both vital and disturbing. The message was clear. A faction within the city's nobility planned to use the chaos to seize control, to purge enemies under the guise of loyalty. "You walk a dangerous path," the contact whispered, eyes darting. "But this is a war that will change everything." You listened, absorbing every detail, names, dates, places, a tapestry of intrigue woven with deadly threads. The guild was not just fighting for survival, but for the very soul of the city. The nights grew longer, the air thicker with menace. You found solace only in the quiet moments with Alara, whose strength and wisdom were anchors in the storm. Together, you crafted plans, sharpened your blades, and prepared for the battles yet to come. But even in the darkest hours, the echoes of deception haunted your thoughts, reminding you that in this world, shadows could be both refuge and prison. The gathering storm. The city was a living beast, its breath ragged and shallow beneath a sky thick with swirling thunderclouds. The air vibrated with the unspoken tension of a storm brewing, a storm not only of wind and rain, but of war, betrayal, and desperation. Every cobblestone seemed to hum with the restless energy of a people standing on the brink of chaos. Inside the guild's stronghold, the atmosphere was electric, alive with the frenetic energy of preparation and resolve. The once silent halls echoed with the clang of hammers striking steel as blacksmiths worked tirelessly, reforging weapons and patching armor scarred by battles past. Scouts and messengers rushed in and out, their faces grim, carrying urgent news and secret missives. You stood at the heart of this maelstrom, your mind a whirlwind of strategy and survival. The intelligence you'd gathered, the betrayals within the city's ruling class, the shifting loyalties of mercenary bands, the fragile and often treacherous alliances you'd forged, now demanded swift, decisive action. The luxury of hesitation was gone. The guild's future depended on seizing the moment before enemies tightened their grip. Mara, standing tall amid the chaos, addressed the gathered council with the steel of a commander hardened by loss and necessity. "Our enemies believe us fractured, vulnerable," she declared, voice ringing clear over the din. "Let us show them the storm that rises from the ashes of our trials. We will strike first, with precision and fury, and remind them why the guild commands respect and fear." The plans unfurled like a complex tapestry. Raids aimed at severing enemy supply lines, sabotage missions deep within hostile strongholds, covert operations designed to fracture alliances and turn enemies against each other. Every strike, every whisper of deception was a thread in the grand design to reclaim control. Your role expanded beyond that of assassin to diplomat, tactician, and spy. Every foray into the city's shadowed streets was fraught with peril. The faces you passed might be friend or foe, and every conversation was a delicate dance of veiled meanings and hidden threats. Your meeting with the mercenary leader was a stark reminder of the delicate balance you had to maintain. The man's cold gaze assessed you thoroughly, weighing promises against risk. "We walk a dangerous line," he said, voice low and gravelly. "Our goals differ, but our enemies overlap. If we join forces, it must be on terms that benefit us both." Hours passed in tense negotiation, each word carefully measured, each smile hiding a blade. Outside, the city stirred. Rumors of rebellion whispered through taverns and marketplaces, the common folk stirred by fear, hope, and the promise of change. The social fabric frayed, threatening to unravel in the face of impending war. Your nights were restless. Memories of past battles and lost comrades haunted your dreams, the cold bite of betrayal lingering like a ghost in your mind. Yet, amid the darkness, moments of light emerged, brief exchanges with Alara, whose calm presence grounded you, reminders that even in the storm, loyalty and hope endured. Together you honed your skills, sharpened your blades, and steeled your spirits. The coming conflict would test every fiber of your being, but you were determined to stand unbroken. Outside the guild's walls, the storm finally broke. The first thunderclap shattered the fragile silence as enemy forces mobilized, their banners unfurling like dark omens against the gray sky. The city's narrow streets became battlefields, alive with the clash of steel and the cries of the desperate. Every decision you had made, every alliance forged or broken, sent ripples through the chaos, turning tides, toppling plans, shifting the fragile balance of power. In the eye of the storm, you moved like a shadow, silent, deadly, and resolute. The battle was no longer just for survival. It was for the soul of the city, for the legacy of the guild, and for the hope that, after the storm passed, a new dawn might rise. The storm had come, and you were its fiercest gale, the flames of betrayal. The aftermath of the storm was a city transformed into a burning labyrinth of ruin and suspicion. Thick smoke coiled like serpents above rooftops, casting an eerie twilight over streets cracked with debris and stained with the remnants of violence. The acrid tang of charred wood mingled with the faint metallic scent of spilled blood, a grim perfume that seemed to seep into the very stones. Within the guild sanctuary, the atmosphere was suffocating, laden with tension, fear, and a sense of impending collapse. The fierce battles outside had left physical wounds, but it was the invisible wounds, the fractures in trust and loyalty, that threatened to rend the guild apart. You paced the cold, shadowed hallways of the war room, each step echoing like a heartbeat of unease. Your mind churned with memories of friends lost, of secrets uncovered, and of the terrible realization that the true enemy was not only beyond the walls, but nestled deep within your own ranks. Mara's voice, though steady, bore the weight of exhaustion and sorrow as she addressed the council. Our enemies have struck at us not only with swords and fire, but with poison, seeds of betrayal planted among us. We must root out these vipers before they strike again, before the guild crumbles from within. Her words sparked a wave of apprehension and determination. The hunt for the traitor became an obsession. Every glance exchanged in the corridors was tinged with suspicion, every whispered conversation a potential trap. Allies became shadows, and shadows seemed to hold the shape of enemies. You were thrust into the heart of the investigation, tracing threads of deceit through the labyrinthine city. Secret meetings in abandoned cellars, coded messages hidden beneath layers of deception, alliances that shifted like sand, all revealed a conspiracy more intricate and dangerous than you had imagined. The weight of betrayal was a knife twisting in your heart. A trusted lieutenant, once a brother in arms, was unmasked as a spy. Plans painstakingly crafted were undone by traitors at every turn. The fabric of trust unraveled, threatening to pull the entire guild into ruin. One night, under a sky swallowed by clouds, you tracked the traitor to a forgotten crypt beneath the city. The air was thick with the scent of damp stone and decay. The confrontation was a deadly dance. Words like venom spat between you, blades flashing in the cold darkness. The traitor's motives were tangled: fear, greed, desperation, and perhaps a misplaced loyalty to a cause that you could never fully understand. The fight left scars beyond flesh, wounds in your soul that time would struggle to heal. When the final blow was dealt, and silence settled like a shroud, the guild was left to grapple with the cost of betrayal. Unity was shattered, and the path ahead was obscured by doubt and sorrow. Yet, even amid the ruins, a new resolve was kindled. The guild had survived the flames of treachery, battered but unbroken. Bonds were reforged in the crucible of hardship. Blades were sharpened with renewed purpose. Plans were whispered once more in the flickering candlelight. The war was far from over. Every alliance was now tinged with caution, every shadow a potential threat, but also a chance for redemption. Outside the walls, the city itself seemed to hold its breath, caught between despair and hope. The common folk whispered of change, of upheaval, their voices a fragile chorus amid the chaos. And you, wounded in body and spirit but unbowed, stood ready to face whatever darkness loomed on the horizon. The flames of betrayal had scorched the past, but from their ashes, a new future might yet rise. Shadows over the city. The city was no longer simply a place of stone and timber. It had become a living, breathing entity, wounded, restless, and darkened by the shadows that now stretched long across every alley and street. The once bustling marketplaces, vibrant with the shouts of merchants and laughter of children, were now hushed, cloaked in an uneasy silence. Fear seeped into the very stones, settling like dust in the corners where light dared not reach. The aftermath of the betrayal had shattered more than just trust within the guild. It had sent ripples through the entire city, reaching into the homes of common folk, stirring unrest among the poor and disillusioned, and sending whispers into the gilded halls of nobles. The fragile balance of power teetered on the edge of collapse. You moved through the city like a shadow, your footsteps silent but purposeful. The night air was cold and sharp, biting through the layers of your worn cloak. Every face you passed seemed to hold a secret. Every glance carried a hidden meaning. You were not just a survivor of past storms. You were a sentinel against the darkness gathering beyond the horizon. The guild's inner chambers had become a fortress of whispered meetings and urgent strategy. Mara, though weary, had transformed her grief and rage into a fierce determination to reclaim the city's soul. The council convened daily, poring over reports, plotting counterstrikes, and weaving a web of intelligence that sought to ensnare the enemies lurking in the shadows. Yet, for all the plans and schemes, an ominous uncertainty hung in the air. The traitors who had nearly destroyed the guild had not acted alone. New threats had emerged, their intentions masked by veils of deceit and power. One evening, under a moonless sky, you met with an informant known only as Silas, a man whose loyalties had always been as shifting as the tides. His face was lined with age and experience, his eyes sharp and restless. He spoke in hushed tones, glancing over his shoulder, as if the very walls might listen. "There's movement in the east quarter," he warned. "Strange alliances are forming. Mercenaries, thieves, even some disillusioned knights. They gather under a banner unknown to most. They seek to exploit the city's chaos for their own gain." The words chilled you. The city's fractures were deeper than ever, and the shadows grew longer. Days bled into nights as you traced these rumors, slipping through the labyrinthine backstreets and forgotten tunnels beneath the city. The underbelly of the city revealed its dark heart, a world of black markets, secret gatherings, and whispered plots. You've heard tales of stolen weapons funneled to unknown factions, of masked figures meeting in abandoned chapels, and of old grudges rekindled in the flickering firelight of hidden dens. One night you stumbled upon a clandestine meeting in the ruins of an old monastery. The air was thick with smoke and tension as voices, rough and conspiratorial, spoke of revolution and retribution. The leaders of these new forces were not mere criminals. They were disillusioned nobles, former soldiers, and ambitious opportunists united by a shared hunger for power and revenge. The realization settled heavily on your shoulders. The city was on the cusp of a civil war, and the guild was caught in the eye of the storm once again. Returning to the guild's refuge, you found Mara waiting, her expression grim but resolute. "We knew the storm was not over," she said quietly. "But now it's clear. We must prepare not only to defend but to strike, to reclaim the streets before they are lost to chaos." Plans were drawn and redrawn late into the night. The guild's agents would infiltrate these factions, sow discord among their ranks, and disrupt their efforts before they could gather strength. But the task was daunting. The lines between friend and foe blurred further each day, and the cost of error was higher than ever. In the quiet moments before dawn, you found yourself wandering the city's rooftops, watching as the first pale light crept over the horizon. The rooftops, once a refuge for silent observation, now seemed exposed, a fragile vantage point above a city teetering on the edge. Your thoughts drifted to Alara, her calm presence a rare beacon of warmth in the encroaching cold. You wondered if she too felt the weight of the city's fate pressing on her heart, if the countless dangers lurking in every shadow haunted her dreams as they haunted yours. The bond between you was a lifeline, proof that even amid darkness, connection could survive and give strength. But the city would not wait. The coming days brought violent skirmishes as factions clashed in streets once filled with life. Fires erupted in narrow alleys, cries of battle echoed through the night, and the once invisible war spilled into the open. The guild fought not just with blade and cunning, but with the resilience forged in years of hardship. Each victory was a fragile thread in a tapestry woven from pain and hope. You moved through the chaos like a wraith, striking swiftly and vanishing before the enemy could respond. Every mission carried the weight of countless lives, friends, foes, and innocents caught between. As the conflict escalated, whispers spread of a mysterious figure rising among the rebels, someone skilled in manipulation and dark arts, whose influence threatened to unravel the delicate fabric holding the city together. Your path, tangled with intrigue and danger, led you closer to this enigma. To confront it, you would need to delve deeper into the city's darkest corners than ever before. The shadows over the city thickened, but within you burned a fierce resolve. The guild's survival, and the city's future, depended on facing the darkness head-on. The storm was far from over, and you were ready to meet it. The web of deceit. The city, already ravaged by conflict and betrayal, now lay ensnared in an even darker trap, the intricate web of deceit that wove through every faction, every street, every whispered secret. It was a tapestry spun from lies so artful, so seamless, that even the most vigilant found themselves entangled, unable to discern friend from foe. You had long understood that the battles fought with steel and fire were only the surface of a deeper, more insidious war. Now, as the guild's shadow agents worked feverishly to unmask the architects of this chaos, the true scale of deception unfolded before you like a poisonous bloom. Mara summoned the council in the dim light of the guild's war room, the flicker of candles casting long shadows across the maps and parchments strewn across the ancient oak table. Her gaze was sharp, eyes glinting with the fierce intelligence that had kept the guild alive through so many trials. "We are not merely fighting enemies who wield swords and daggers," she declared, voice low and steady. "We are fighting a force that moves unseen, that corrupts from within. This web of deceit threatens to choke the very life from the city." The council murmured in agreement, each member well aware of the stakes. The traitors and rebels were no longer isolated cells. They had become a network, a labyrinthine conspiracy that reached into the highest towers and the darkest gutters alike. Your role as an assassin had evolved beyond silent kills and shadowed infiltration. You were now a master of subterfuge, a spider weaving counter-traps, spinning lies to catch lies, and uncovering the hidden threads that bound this conspiracy together. Days blurred into nights as you slipped between the city's facades, the noble courts dripping with gold and hypocrisy, the smoky taverns alive with whispered plots, the shadowed docks where smugglers exchanged secrets for coin. Every interaction was a delicate game of masks, where a single misstep could unravel everything. One evening, you received a covert message delivered beneath the pale light of a dying lantern, a summons to meet a figure known only as the Raven, a shadowy informant whose existence was rumored but rarely confirmed. The rendezvous was set in the catacombs beneath the old cathedral, a place long forgotten except by those who trafficked in secrets. Descending into the cold, damp tunnels, your senses heightened with every step. The air was thick with the scent of mildew and ancient dust, broken only by the faint flicker of torchlight. The Raven awaited you in a small chamber, their face obscured beneath a hood, voice barely more than a whisper. "The web is tighter than you think," they warned. "Those you trust may be the very ones pulling the strings. The rebellion is but a pawn in a far greater game." The words struck you like a blow. Your mind raced as you processed the layers of betrayal hinted at by the Raven. The conspiracy extended beyond the city, threading into powerful factions whose motives remained shrouded in darkness. Over the following days, your missions took on a new urgency. You infiltrated noble houses to retrieve hidden letters, intercepted secret meetings between rival factions, and deciphered coded messages buried in the most mundane of correspondences. Each discovery peeled back another layer of the intricate plot, revealing corruption, ambition, and greed intertwined with desperation and broken loyalties. Amid this tangled web, you found moments of fragile connection with Alara, whose steady presence grounded you. Together, you shared whispered conversations beneath starlit skies, the briefest of respites from the storm that raged around you. Her insight and calm balanced your relentless pursuit of truth, reminding you that even in a world of shadows, light could persist. But the city's unrest grew. The common folk, caught between the machinations of nobles and rebels, began to rise. Riots erupted in marketplaces, fueled by hunger and fear. The guild, already stretched thin, was forced to divert resources to quell these uprisings, all while the true enemy moved unseen in the background. Your missions grew more perilous as the line between ally and adversary blurred beyond recognition. Every betrayal cut deeper. Every victory was tempered by new threats emerging from the darkness. In a daring operation, you uncovered a plot to assassinate Mara herself, a strike meant to shatter the guild's fragile hold on the city. The assassin sent was a ghost from your past, skilled and merciless, a reminder that the shadows held long memories and deadlier foes. The confrontation was brutal, a dance of blades beneath the moonlight, every strike a test of skill and will. You emerged victorious but scarred, the cost of survival etched into your flesh and soul. With Mara's life saved, the guild's resolve hardened. The web of deceit was vast, but you had found its pulse. Now came the dangerous work of cutting its strands, exposing traitors, dismantling alliances, and preparing for the inevitable final confrontation. The city held its breath, waiting for the dawn of a reckoning that would decide its fate. You stood at the precipice, the weight of countless lives heavy in your hands. The web was tangled and deadly, but you were the thread that could unravel it all, or be consumed by it. The night was far from over, and in the shadows, the true battle awaited. The final reckoning. The city lay shrouded in darkness, yet it buzzed with a tense energy, an electric current of anticipation that rippled through every alley, every rooftop, every shadow. This was the night everything would change. The fragile balance of power, the web of deceit and violence, the hidden struggles beneath the surface, all were converging toward a final, decisive moment. The air was heavy with the scent of smoke, sweat, and the cold bite of impending rain. You stood high above it all on the tallest tower of the guild's stronghold, wrapped in your dark cloak, your breath visible in the chill night air. Below, the streets were eerily quiet, but you knew that silence was a mere veil waiting to be torn apart. Your mind raced with memories, every mission, every whisper, every betrayal that had led to this night. The faces of those lost flickered like ghosts behind your eyes, reminding you of what was at stake. Beside you, Mara's steady gaze cut through the darkness. "This is no longer just about survival," she said softly but firmly. "It's about reclaiming the city's soul. If we fail tonight, all hope will be lost." The guild had prepared meticulously for this night. Spies and informants had worked tirelessly to map enemy movements, sabotage supply lines, and gather intelligence on the factions conspiring to seize control. Yet, despite all efforts, the enemy was cunning and ruthless, a force born of desperation and ambition that had no intention of surrendering quietly. The city's streets, usually teeming with life, were now battlefields. Torches flickered like dying stars, casting monstrous shadows on crumbling walls. The clash of steel, the cries of the wounded, and the distant roar of fires filled the night air with a cacophony that spoke of chaos and fury. You moved like a shadow among shadows, your every step calculated, your senses razor sharp. This was more than a battle of blades, it was a battle of wills, of minds, and of hearts. As you slipped through the chaos, you recalled your journey, the years spent in silence, training in the arts of stealth and assassination, the bitter betrayals that cut deeper than any blade, the fleeting moments of connection and hope, especially with Ilara, whose calm strength had been a light in the darkest times. Now, every moment was charged with urgency. You sought the enemy leaders who commanded the rebellion, the puppeteers pulling the strings from behind veiled curtains. To confront them was to strike at the very heart of the city's corruption. The streets twisted and turned like a living maze, but your instincts guided you unerringly. You passed shattered carts and broken homes, the scars of war etched into every surface. Innocent voices were caught in the crossfire, their suffering a heavy burden that fueled your resolve. At last, you reached the heart of the enemy's stronghold, a fortified manor atop a hill, surrounded by guards and blazing torches. Steeling yourself, you moved into the shadows, blending seamlessly with the night. Inside, the air was thick with tension and the scent of rich wine and fear. The enemy leaders gathered in the grand hall, their faces lit by flickering candlelight, their voices low but filled with menace. Among them was the shadowy figure who had orchestrated so much pain, the mastermind behind the city's descent into chaos. The confrontation was inevitable. Steel sang through the air as the duel began, a deadly dance of skill and desperation. Every strike was met with parry, every feint with counter. The fight spilled through corridors and stairwells, echoing with the clash of wills. In those moments, time seemed to slow. You drew on every lesson, every scar, every breath of your long journey. The enemy was formidable, but your resolve burned fiercer. Finally, with a swift and decisive blow, the battle ended. The shadow fell, defeated, and the web of deceit began to unravel. The dawn broke slowly over the city, casting golden light on a battered but unbroken landscape. The fires of conflict faded, replaced by the cautious hope of a new day. The guild had survived, but the cost was written in the weary faces of its members and the silent memorials to those who would never return. Mara stood beside you once more, eyes reflecting the first rays of sunlight. "The city will heal," she said quietly, "but it will never forget." You nodded, feeling the weight of both loss and possibility. The path ahead would be long and fraught with challenges, but tonight had proven that even in the deepest darkness, there was a spark worth fighting for. And now, dear listener, as our tale of shadows, betrayal, and survival draws to its close, it is time for you to lay down your burdens and embrace the quiet peace of night. Find your comfortable place, breathe deeply, and let the gentle calm of the story carry you toward restful sleep. If this journey through the perilous world of a medieval assassin moved you, please consider subscribing to join us for more stories that illuminate the hidden corners of history. Share your thoughts in the comments, where you are watching from, what time it is in your world. Your presence gives life to these tales. May your night be peaceful, your dreams vivid, and your heart ever courageous. Good night, and until we meet again in the shadows of another story. Was far from over, but the shadows within had been faced, for now. And as the next storm gathered on the horizon, you knew one thing clearly. Trust was the most precious and dangerous weapon of all. Allies and enemies. The bitter aftertaste of betrayal still clung to the air inside the guild's walls, like a thick fog that refused to lift. But the war, your war, was far from over. The damage was severe, the scars still fresh, yet you could feel the pulse of survival beating stronger beneath the rubble. It was time to look beyond the shattered stones of your home, beyond old enmities and grudges that had kept the city divided for decades. This was a new battlefield, one of shifting loyalties, whispered secrets, and fragile alliances. To stand a chance, the guild had to reach out, to weave new ties, even if that meant making friends with those you once called enemies. The city itself had become a boiling cauldron of power plays. In the smoky taverns, beneath the flickering torchlight of back alleys, the fate of factions was decided over mugs of stale ale and carefully measured words. Every glance was weighted, every smile a potential trap. The RSM,